I also saw John Gavazzi from Pennsylvania. John, why don't you go take the floor?
I'll try to be brief. We have a 2 year legislative session, which is probably comparable to most places in the country. And so, two legislative sessions ago, we actually wrote our bill. We approached legislators, and basically no one wanted to do it. So, during our last legislative session, we actually did get a prime sponsor, and I'm going to keep going with the theme of persistence that I had heard earlier from your lobbyist. Is that we have been very persistent, and we actually last legislative session, the Republicans here in Pennsylvania were in charge of the House. They're also in charge of the Senate, but we found some very strong advocates in the Republican Party here in Pennsylvania. We got a very strong prime sponsor, but then the problem was in the legislative or the licensure committee that the person who was chairing said everybody's got to agree to the bill. And we were like, the psychiatrists are never going to agree. So we had multiple meetings with both, as the lobbyist from Illinois said, multiple meetings with both Pennsylvania Medical Society and the Pennsylvania Psychiatric Association or Society. I can't remember which one it is, but they would not budge at all. So they said nothing, no how, and that really aggravated the legislators. So they moved forward, and again, in spite of the fact that the chair of the licensure committee wouldn't pass any information or any legislation, we actually had the votes last legislative session to get it out of committee, but the chair wouldn't do it. Now, during this current legislative session, the Democrats are in charge of the House by literally a single seat. And what has happened through the course of this legislative session is Democrats have resigned or they resigned but got another position. Some were either in state government or just resigned from the House. So they had to do these special elections. So these special elections stopped literally all the legislation in the House from going forward until they figured out who was going to be in charge. Would it be the Democrats or would it be the Republicans? So during each of those, the Democrat won. So the Democrats remained in charge of the House. But then there was a huge water leak. Again, this could only happen in Pennsylvania. That literally shut down legislation for 3 months. So from December until just recently in March, everybody was in recess so that the building could be repaired. In the meantime, we once again have a lot of Republican support for our bill. And there's a Democrat who's in charge of the licensure committee. And of course, the Democrats are still in charge of the entire House. We literally have the votes at this point. They've counted the votes. We have the votes. And for some reason, we don't know exactly, because this literally happened not this past week, the week before. All of a sudden, the licensure committee chair went silent on us. So we had a lot of outreach, and we're still waiting to hear back why they're not bringing it to a vote. So just to give you a little bit more context, and then I said I was going to be brief. I'm obviously way too long as it is. But we had a hearing for just the psychologists and the prescriptive authority, and that went very well. Then, because advanced practice nurses, nurse practitioners are trying to get greater independence, and nurse midwives are trying to also get a limited prescriptive authority. Then we had a second hearing early in March, as soon as the Capitol opened back up, with nurse practitioners, psychologists who want to prescribe, and midwives, and then the physicians were there. And basically, their argument was the whole time, as was talked about by the lobbyist, is about safety. And in spite of the fact that we brought up lots of different data points as to how it's been safe and how no state who's approved prescriptive authority has pulled that back, again, we still haven't gotten that next step. So we're literally hoping in the next 2 to 3 weeks that we will have a vote in the licensure committee get it out of that's our only goal at this point, is get it out of the licensure committee and get it out of the House. So then that next legislative session, we can then move to the Senate, because there's just not going to be enough time with the rest of the year, because the budget process in Pennsylvania is always a nightmare. So that's where we are. We're in the licensure committee in the House. We have the votes. We're waiting for the vote to happen, and then hopefully we get it out of the licensure committee. So that's the long-winded update. So thank you, Beth. Oh, and the other thing too, that I also want to say this. So in Pennsylvania, we have a very strong student, we call them PPAGs. So we have a student organization, and students, and Beth, correct me if I'm wrong, if they've been a PPAGs member for at least a year, they can then vote in the election.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so hit up your student organizations. Here in Pennsylvania, we've got tons of different universities, so we've got a lot of students. So we're hoping to funnel a lot of votes towards Beth.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to say that since we're in the middle of the nominations period right now, people need to go to the APA website, click on My APA, and then scroll down. You see 2024 APA presidential election. Click on that, and then you get to the election site. So that's how you get your ballot to vote. But thank you, John. That's great. Yeah, we can have students as well as everyone else vote this year, which would be fantastic. Thank you, John. Thank you for all the work that you're doing in Pennsylvania.
Thank you.